Visual artists, the really good ones, are amazingly original people. Their works grab our attention because they're one of a kind. But every artist begins with the same essential building blocks. These building blocks are called the elements of art, and here they are. Color, line, value, space, shape, form, and texture. We're at the University of Kentucky Art Museum, and we're on a mission to see how some well-known artists use these elements. Let's start with color. Color is a dramatic way of expressing your individuality. Plants know that, and painters do too. A color wheel gives us a way to think about color and to organize it. The primary colors of red, yellow, and blue are central to the wheel because they can't be made by mixing other colors. Blend red and blue and you get purple, one of the secondary colors. The other secondary colors are orange, the combination of red and yellow, and green, the combination of blue and yellow. It's all very scientific. In this painting called Glisten, Sam Gilliam chooses color over other concerns. You might say that this is a painting about color. He uses lots of different hues within the red family, pink, red, and red-orange, just to name a few. Here's another way Gilliam uses the color wheel. See the vivid green paint in the upper left corner of the painting? He's surprising us with an opposite color, green, in a field of red. It gives this whole section a wake-up call. Gilliam loves jazz, and adding green jazzes up this section of the painting. The art element of line leads your eye through a work of art. We follow the line to the center of this drawing by Rembrandt, and it takes us to the most important part of the story, Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac. Artists create line in many ways. The most obvious is just outlining. Notice how fluid Rembrandt's lines are? Cross-hatching, the technique of weaving lines across each other, creates shaded areas and gives the work depth. Now let's take a look at one of the outdoor works and see how a contemporary sculptor uses line. George Ricky's stainless steel sculpture called Two Lines Oblique is made of tapered lines that look like pen strokes or blades of grass. But these lines move. It's like he's drawing in space and using the wind as part of the composition. The reflective surface means that sunlight changes the sculpture too. And it all started with just two kinetic lines. In Key Lords of the Prismatic Situations, Wolfgang Paulin creates broken lines with paint, just enough to suggest a human figure. In this painting, you also see implied lines, negative or empty spaces between blocks of color. These work like lines to enclose the shapes. So artists use real line and line that's suggested. Let's stick with this painting for a minute because it gives us a good example of another element of art, value. Value is about adding black or white to a color. In this painting, Paulin leans on value. He mixes black into the paint to darken the hue and achieve the mood he's looking for. When we add black, it's called a shade of the color. When we add white to a color, it's called a tint. This painting, Columnar Head by Leon Golub, has lots of golden and brown tints. The two paintings, Key Lords of the Prismatic Situations and Columnar Head, were both inspired by the human form, but the differences in value create a dramatic contrast between the two. Just to review, we're talking about value. When you change value by adding black to a color, it's called a shade. When you add white to a color, that's a tint. Let's move on to a 19th century landscape and see another element of art. Space gives a painting a sense of depth. In Giverny, Willard Metcalf gives us a convincing picture of space by using light, shadows, overlapping objects, and planes of color. Space is what's above, below, between, around, and within things. It's a lot of prepositions to describe an element of art. Alexander Calder's mobiles have been described as drawings in space. These metal and wire sculptures continually play with space. They hover and shift with every current of air. Space highlights each of the cutouts and gives them importance. There's plenty of space around and under this sculpture too, so you can view it from a variety of perspectives. We enjoy Calder's mobile in another way when we see the shadow on the wall. This takes us to another element of art, and that's shape. When you enclose an area, you create shape, but you don't need a line to do it. Calder's shapes are defined by color or value. These detached bodies are interesting because their shapes look like leaves or birds or fish. The shapes add a playful, whimsical quality to Calder's works. Shapes can be geometric or organic. What would you call these? Alex Katz paints a portrait of his wife in the red coat. He doesn't try to tell a story or move us emotionally. His work is about bold, dramatic images. It's a collage of shapes, saturated with color. When you create shape and make it three-dimensional, you've got form. The artists of the Renaissance were trying for a new naturalism. They wanted their figures to look so lifelike that they could almost speak to us. Take a look at this painting of the Madonna and Child by Agostino Carracci. The solid, muscular forms are about mass and volume, and that's exactly what the painter had in mind. Form was also important in this bronze sculpture by Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux. The subject is a strong woman, and Carpeaux chose bronze as his medium so he could emphasize the power and dignity of her form. It's interesting to learn that Carpeaux practiced sculpting blindfolded. He said that shaping a sculpture like this was the only way to understand form. Gilbert Stuart used saturated color and fluid brush strokes to bring George Washington to life. He emphasized the form of Washington's face by dropping almost everything else out of the painting. Texture refers to how things feel or how they look like they'd feel. We experience texture with two of our senses, the sense of sight and the sense of touch. The work Lovebirds by Elijah Pierce has the simplest of compositions, birds and leaves. Pierce creates interest by combining contrasting textures, smooth leaves and delicately carved feathers. Remember, texture is also how something looks like it would feel. The folds of this dress and the portrait of Madeleine by Emile Bernard tell the viewer this is a fine and expensive fabric, something you'd like to be wearing. Texture is sometimes just about texture. To show you what I mean, let's go back where we started, the Sam Gilliam painting, Glisten. You notice the color first, but after that it's the texture of the canvas that catches your eye. Gilliam gives us an amazing range of surfaces, from the feathery sections at the center of the canvas to the crisp sections at the edge. How did he do this? Sometimes he rakes the surface of his work to create texture. In Glisten, he also wraps the canvas around the edges, creating a three-dimensional painting. Gilliam wants viewers to come back to this painting, to look a second time, and texture is an element that brings us back again and again. Let's zoom back through the elements of art we've just explored. Color, texture, line, value, space, shape, and form. It's great to know about the elements of art because they're central to every work we see. The elements of art help define the style of an artist.